I'd like to register an interest as the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for International Freedom of Religion or Belief. I'm sure I speak for all members of that APPG when I express that I am very concerned about Sri Lankan government's withdrawal from its commitment to reconciliation, to accountability, to human rights. And I'm also very concerned about the treatment of religious or belief communities within Sri Lanka. The UN Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Religion or Belief, Dr. Ahmed Shahid, visited Sri Lanka and noted that there were frequent reports of acts of intolerance and the failure of the state to protect individuals and communities targeted by such hostility. Dr. Shahid also said Muslim communities and new Christian churches face a range of harassment and assaults that ranges from interruption, damage to places of worship, physical assaults on clergy, intimidation, mob violence, restricting the use of places of worship, the obstruction of religious rights, incitement to violence, and many, many other acts of intolerance. Indeed, since the beginning of 2015 to the end of June 2019, the National Christian Evangelical Alliance of Sri Lanka has documented an estimated 387 attacks or violations targeting Christians specifically. When it comes to Muslims in Sri Lanka, according to CSW, religious intolerance towards that community predates the 2019 Easter bombings. Many propagators of hate speech towards Muslims play on the economic factors, and anti-Muslim rumours are also a regular feature of life on Sri Lankan social media. Since the bombings, Sri Lankan Muslims have faced an upsurge in violation of their basic rights, as well as assaults and indeed other abuse. And this lack of accountability that abusers and perpetrators of violence face in Sri Lanka is a problem that was raised by many different communities to the Special Rapporteur. The unwillingness of the authorities to protect communities against threats and acts of violence. And we have to address the issue of the legal basis, as the Sri Lankan government constitution declares. Buddhism shall be given the foremost place by the state. And a 2003 Supreme Court ruling determined that the state was constitutionally required to protect only Buddhism. This gross violation of human rights puts into law the government's refusal to treat all religious or belief communities fairly. They should all be treated the same. Sri Lankan state is particularly not responsive to violence and abuse against women. Women's experience of ethnic religious hostility, including the violence, the displacement and the stereotyping, do not receive attention or redress. Women also experience gender-specific hate speech and human rights violations. And moreover, women's human rights activists appear to be at risk from fundamentalist members in their own religious communities. I, as others have said, expressed some concern over the government forcing cremation upon Muslims and Christians and other ethnic groups, and this, I believe, is against the human rights of every one of those different religions, and to be based on absolutely no scientific or medical evidence, I think also gives me great concern. I would like to see that those in position of power are to be made accountable for their war crimes by bringing them to court, take away their assets and their travel bans. And Sri Lanka, with the influence of hate speech, legal discrimination and impunity for violent actors, will only serve to cause more conflict and violence in Sri Lanka in the long run. I always like to leave a scripture text, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I do that in all these debates because it's important to do so. Galatians chapter 6 verses 2, and it says, it urges us, every one of us, let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. The people of Sri Lanka, I believe, are crying out for that very help. I urge the Minister, for the sake of every community in Sri Lanka, to use all channels available to him to encourage his Sri Lankan counterparts to commit to UN Human Rights Council resolution of the 30th of the 1st and to the protection of freedom of religion or belief for all. We are here to speak up for those who have no voice. Thank you.
Biddy Link, Chris Grayling.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and can I congratulate not just the Honourable Lady from Richmond Morden, but a collection of near neighbours of mine to the north for securing this speech. I do, Mr. Deputy Speaker, have a vivid memory of being in Sri Lanka a few years ago as warplanes passed overhead, heading in the direction of the Tamil areas of the country. A very stark reminder of the turmoil that country has experienced. But whilst I'm in no doubt that there were sometimes dreadful deeds on both sides of